Hey, warmer for Vivo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. This is going to be a two-part podcast today, mainly because we just did not get any college basketball news and notes really over the weekend. It's really starting to slow down with regards to the transfer portal, which means that the conference preview podcast, those are going to be getting started hopefully within the next 10 or so days. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to keep the great guests going all throughout the offseason, and today we've got another tremendous one, Curtis Rogers. He does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports. This time of year, he's doing a great job doing the pre- and post-game hosting for the Seattle Mariners over there with their official flagship station. We're going to chat with him about what we all saw with the NBA draft decisions. We're going to take a look at some of these teams that might be flying a little bit under the radar as well. It's just going to be a little bit of a mix and match conversation with him. We're going to be nice and thorough with it, and I do want to try to just get as many perspectives here in the offseason as possible now that a lot of these rosters, they are becoming solidified, so you are going to probably be getting a lot more two-part conversations, and you're going to be getting, shall we say, a little bit shorter podcasts here over the next few weeks, but certainly now that we've got more clarity with these rosters, more previews, and more just taking a look at the upcoming season as well. So we're going to have a fun time with Curtis today. This is going to be a very short, like 2:30 sort of opening segment, mainly because we just didn't get a lot over the weekend, so we're just going to have that nice conversation. I have to put one break in here, and I'll do it nice and quick, and if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, and I would love to be able to take this first segment to be able to answer those questions. You'll be doing me a great solid, so please send these in one of two ways. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, RCM, maybe it does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. As per usual, beggeth you, pleadeth you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. And now that we've got the NBA draft decisions in, we just don't necessarily have a lot of guys that are out there in the portal. Certainly Milan Mimicelovic will be talking about his sweepstakes over the next few days because he's one of the most impactful players that entered in the transfer portal. He should be able to get a king's ransom in terms of what he's going to be able to make in the open market as well. So we're going to be chatting about that until he commits as well. But we've got a lot to be taking a look at. Now we're starting to be able to get into the meat of the offseason. So more thoughtful conversations, more conference previews, and so much more. And we're going to have one of those great chats today with Curtis on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Curtis Rogers aboard. He does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. This time of year, he's really good on the baseball front as he does the pre- and post-game hosting for the Seattle Mariners on the radio side for their official flagship station. Additionally, I know that he's doing a great job taking a look at football. He's doing a great job all year round taking a look at college basketball and so much more. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at A Kid from Kent altogether. And Curtis, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always happy to hop on with you, talk some college ball, especially as we have now seen the NBA draft deadline come and go. We're getting a much better, clearer picture of who is staying, who is going, what these teams atop the top 25 preseason prognostications look like. And I'm super excited because now we're getting a much better picture of what this college basketball season could shape up to be.
Yep, I am right there with you. And just what did you make out of some of those NBA draft decisions? Because, in my opinion, perhaps the most surprising one was Malik Thomas deciding that he was going to stay in the NBA draft. But it feels like this has been the theme the last few years with these decisions, and felt like it was once again this year. A lot of guys that could have easily gone pro and probably would have, say, 3, 4 years ago, deciding to stay for that NIL money.
Yeah, I think in the case of a lot of guys near the end of the first round, you're looking at, okay, do I want to stay in college and make essentially the same amount as I would make if I were to declare for the NBA draft? And you look at just kind of the coaching you're going to get in the NBA compared to college. We know the pro game, you're going to get the best coaching available. So I can see why some of these guys who may not be essentially lottery picks or at least locks for the lottery would still go to the NBA. Conversely, I think it's a good idea for guys who may not get the first round grade to come back for another year of seasoning at the college level, who then could potentially play their way into a first round grade. Or if you're maybe a back end of the first round guy, could potentially move up into the lottery next year. So I think all in all, the options that exist for a lot of these fringe NBA prospects or guys that, could potentially be first rounders, I actually think it's a really good thing for the sport of basketball, because either way, these guys are going to get developed. Either way, they're going to be taken care of wherever it is that they go. And I think it's less of a risk now for guys to stick around in college, especially because they're being taken care of financially. They don't have to go toil in the European leagues. They don't have to go toil in Asia or Australia or anything like that. They can stick around, stick close to a lot of eyes of a lot of pro programs and scouting staffs, as they're obviously pounding the pavement, getting out to these campuses to watch them. So all in all, I just think it's a good thing for the game of college basketball, really a good thing for the game of basketball that, so many options exist for these guys now, rather than just, hey, I declared for the draft, didn't get taken, and now who knows what my future is going to look like. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make money. Whereas now you can get a good paycheck if you're a high major player, even if you're not even a starter.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I feel like that's been one of the good things of NIL for a lot of these guys and for a lot of these teams in general. And is there any real winners or losers that you take a look at from the NBA draft decisions? Because I think for me, it's a team that didn't even have an NBA draft decision. That would be St. John's, because I thought Tonde Yusufu for the longest time was going to be as good as gone. He decides not only that he's going to return to college, but he didn't waste any time whatsoever. Immediately after he pulled out of the draft, he went to St. John's. It felt like they needed that one piece because Zuby Ejiofor no longer being in the fold, that's a big loss, and I thought that they were massive winners with that.
Oh, absolutely. I think you look at them in the Big East now with Yesufu. I think that is a really, really fun pairing between a guy who can put it in the bucket like that and a St. John's team that I think is going to have huge expectations coming into this season. Obviously, winners of the Big East last year. I think they are going to be right in the thick of things again. Rick Pitino has always made it a point at St. John's to prioritize the transfer player over the incoming freshman. Some people have kind of criticized him for it because, there have been a lot of talented freshmen to come through there. But you look at St. John's, and I don't think Rick Pitino has the kind of patience to wait around for a freshman right now. Whereas Yesufu, like you said, Greg, I thought he was going to go to the NBA draft, especially with the kind of freshman season that he had at Baylor. You look at just his scoring ability. That is somebody who I thought would have been ripe for the NBA. And his decision to come back to St. John's, a couple of things, shows you just how much St. John's is willing to pour out into their NIL. And what makes it interesting, what makes it doubly interesting, Greg, is that you're looking at St. John's, they get the same amount of NIL money that teams of football programs get. And so with that being said, you look at these, schools where basketball is the program that funds the athletic department, like Gonzaga or Xavier or, all these basketball first schools. I know Villanova has a football program, but obviously their, basketball program is what funds that athletic department, since the football program is still at the FCS level. Like, these basketball only schools, I think they could really wield some NIL power here especially because of what they're able to do with their money as opposed to a team like Texas or Ohio State or Alabama, these traditional college football powers. Yes, Alabama has been really competitive in college basketball, but their money might not go as far as, say, a team like, St. John's, where that is the show in town.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I think just expanding upon that point as well, it just feels like it's been a really big offseason year for the Big East because we have all of a sudden DePaul spending. Marquette, they had forgotten that the transfer portal existed. They remembered that the transfer portal existed this offseason. So good for them. Xavier, they've been a team that's really spent. Obviously, UConn and St. John's are trying to stay on top. I feel like out of all of the conferences in college basketball, certainly it's hard to match the SEC and everything that they're doing, but the Big East, I feel like in terms of what they have and where they were last season, I feel like they've taken perhaps the biggest step up of any conference.
I think so, too. I thought it was Dan Hurley who had some pretty interesting comments in this offseason. I forget where he said it, but he mentioned that if you're competing in college basketball these days, $14 million is kind of the going rate in terms of a competitive roster. And if you're not spending $14 million in NIL on your roster, you are going to let a lot slip through the cracks. You're going to have a really tough time competing with the top dogs, with the tournament quality teams. If you are a team that is near the bottom of a power conference and you're not willing to shell out, you're going to stay at the bottom of a power conference. I think there's a direct link between the amount that a program will spend on players and the kinds of success that they will have. I mean, look at what Michigan was able to do this last year. I know Arizona was a top spending team in college basketball. Indiana, I believe, was the highest spending team. I think at around $32 million was their entire NIL fund for their basketball team. And woof, they did not get a good return on investment this season. But not to say that I think that'll scare them away from continuing to spend on that program, especially when you have a donor like Mark Cuban, who I know was instrumental in getting their football program up and running and winning a national championship this year. I believe he admitted to footing the bill for Fernando Mendoza. So maybe there's a Fernando Mendoza at the college basketball ranks that the Hoosiers could go out and get. But it's buying lottery tickets, essentially, whereas you spend more, you're going to be able to have more winning combinations. I think these Big East schools, they've got some deep pockets. I like that they're able to kind of put these rosters together and go out there and play with the big boys, because as we know, when the Big East is cooking like it was a couple of years ago, that's some really fun basketball. And they're definitely, I know in a traditional sense, they're not a power conference in the way that we think of the Big Ten and the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12, but the Big East very much a power conference in college basketball when things are rolling for them.
Yep, no question about it. And it is nice that these teams have still been going for it in general. And that leads me to this question, because you're based out there in the great state of Washington. We know that Washington, a few years ago, they really went for it when they brought in Great Osibor, and they brought in Great Osibor. That's about all I can say. They did bring in Great Osibor, and they didn't have much else around them this past season. Once again, a disappointment, because it felt like it was almost what we had a few years ago, where they had Hans Steinbeck, and that was about it. How do you take a look at this offseason that they've had? Because it feels like they're spreading the wealth a little bit more, but it also just feels like they're not keeping up with the Joneses in the Big Ten as well.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten is a conference where you are really going to have to take a long look at yourself and say, are we doing this the right way? And I think for a lot of years, Washington was not doing it the right way, and it saw them fall further and further behind in the old Pac-12, in the now the new Big Ten. The Big Ten, as we know, a very competitive conference, really hard to just kind of break your way through into that top half, top quarter of the conference. And, look, they have the defending national champion in Michigan. They have a team that recently went to a national final in Purdue. Illinois was in the Final Four this last year. Michigan State is routinely among the best schools in college basketball. You've got, all these programs that have been in Nebraska, even this last year, had their best year as a program. So it is hyper competitive in the Big Ten. I do kind of like some of the moves that they made in the portal. I thought Lawan Watts was an interesting addition, former Washington State Cougar, then went to Texas Tech. now at Washington. His family has actually been really big in the Seattle basketball scene. Donald Watts, Slick Watts, a lot of deep ties to the Seattle area. Hey, if you're going to hit the portal in the international scene, I think that's a good way to kind of find some hidden gems. I'll be interested to see what Winnie Braga from Brazil can do. 6'9" guy, maybe can fill the role that Hannes Steinbeck had. And Tristan Devers was another one from Australia. So I think this Husky team, if everything goes right for Washington this year, I don't think their ceiling is as high as it was last year, where I'll be honest, I was surprised that they were not a tournament team by the end of the year. I thought they were one of the most disappointing teams in college basketball a year ago. But I think hopefully in year 3, there is some positive momentum because I think Danny Sprinkle really needs it. If not, that Washington program is going to be under the microscope, especially because they are opening a new basketball-only facility on campus. There's going to be a lot of investment into that program. They're going to need some return on that investment really soon for everything to start paying off.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that they're going to need to be able to take some strides forward, and we'll see if they're going to be able to do so for this upcoming season, as we do have our good friend Curtis Rogers joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Curtis, when it comes to the landscape of college basketball, is there a team or two that we have yet to mention that you really have your eye on? Maybe it's a team that's been disappointing year in the offseason, you're wondering what the heck they're doing, or maybe it's a team that's just not getting the attention that you feel like they deserve, and you feel like they put together actually a really nice offseason.
I look at the landscape of college basketball right now. I think a lot of people are kind of quiet on Virginia, and look, I think Virginia made some really nice strides last year in a year where I don't think a lot of people necessarily thought they were going to be as good as they were, where I think this year you look at them, I think they could compete for an ACC title. I know Duke is going to be Duke, and they are going to be a top 5 program, as they always are. They might lose in the Elite 8, as they always do in recent years, but I think the Virginia Cavaliers are a team definitely keep an eye on. What they were able to do a year ago and in the steps that they took forward. I think that is going to be a very interesting watch here in the 2026-2027 season. And hey, they're scoring more than like 50 points a game, which means it's an actual appealing brand of basketball to watch. I know Tony Bennett won a national championship in Virginia, but boy, there were some slogs that the Cavaliers put forth that made it really hard to watch. I mean, I remember his final college basketball game he coached. What was it, the first 4 against Colorado State, where they went, I think, was it over an hour of actual time without scoring a bucket?
Yes.
That can't happen. That really can't happen. But I think Virginia is a team, Greg, where I look at them and I think they've got something cooking over there. I will be very interested to see how their season pans out.
Yep, I am as well. I do think that they've got something cooking. Not as much as we've got cooking whenever you're on this podcast, so Curtis, because you're doing such an amazing job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball and so much more. So love to get people at home know it's on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we will be keeping tabs on the college basketball offseason all offseason long at Seattle Sports. Check out the Seattle Sports YouTube page. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at A Kid From Kent. Lots of good stuff wherever it is you're seeking out that content. And Greg, always happy to hop on with you, talk some college basketball, no matter the time of year. Look, I can't wait for the season to start. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I know the weather's got to cool down a little bit before we get to that portion of the sports calendar, but college basketball season, that's our favorite time of the year. And I always look forward to our conversations talking college ball.
Trust me, during the summer months, there are so many times where I'm begging and pleading for a random college basketball game in Hawaii. That would certainly warm my soul. So I am right there with you. And our guy, Curtis, is doing such an amazing job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Big thanks, Curtis, for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. As I said at the beginning, conference previews. They are going to be getting started here, hopefully within the next, like I said, 10 or so days is where I'm really targeting this. We did have a little bit of a later start with the transfer portal because it opened up after the NCAA tournament wrapped up. It had opened up a little bit earlier in past seasons, but we're going to get those conference previews squared away after we do those conference previews and we go through the offseason when we get back in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.